This interview is part of the Living Legends collection of the Oklahoma Historical Society. It is an interview with Mr. A.D. Ike Holmes, recorded by Mary B. Roberts on September 1st, 1971 in Tulsa. It is being copied for inclusion in the permanent collection of the Oral History Program on March 13th, 1990 by Joel Todd.
All right. First, we want your name. You said it. Give us your entire name and your nickname.
My name is A.D. Ike Holmes. The Ike being a nickname, but I'm better known as Ike than the A.D.
How long have you had the nickname?
I've had the nickname as far back as I can remember, and I truly do not recall when I acquired the nickname Ike.
You even had to use it in the telephone directory.
That is correct.
To be identified.
That is correct. Many friends know me as Ike, as I mentioned, and I am listed in the phone book as Ike Holmes due to the fact they don't recall A.D. at all.
And you were born in Coffeyville, Kansas.
Correct. Born in Coffeyville, Kansas, and then came to Tulsa in 1906, 1 year before statehood. And it was, of course, at that time, Tulsa IT, or Tulsa Indian Territory.
And your father's business was plumbing.
That is correct. He was a plumber, and he came to Tulsa here to work on the big skyscraper, the First National Bank building at 2nd and Main. That big skyscraper was 5 stories tall.
We want to know something about your family, your mother and father, and this little experience that you told us of that happened when you were 6 years old with Geronimo.
Yes, my mother and father both were from Ohio, Cincinnati, and came out here and to Kansas City first, then down to Coffeyville, and then here. He was D.W. Holmes, in the plumbing business here, and later, of course, in the supply business, wholesale plumbing and heating materials. Why, yes, that experience you ask. I was 6 years old, and this was in 1908, and it was on a Saturday night, and a big crowd downtown, and there was some mention that Geronimo, the great Indian, was in town. Now, the government people had brought him up from Fort Sill, and he had to change trains here in Tulsa from the Frisco to the Santa Fe to get to Collinsville, where they were humoring him and allowing him to go to this Indian stomp dance. So he went up the street, we followed, and he went into the Robinson Hotel, located at 3rd and Main. I might add that it's Penny's big store is located there at the present time. Well, anyhow, in the lobby, why, Geronimo was selling postal cards. So my father gave me a nickel and said, go up and buy a postal card from Geronimo. Well, there had been a great deal of talk about what a tough fella he was, and the fact of the matter is he wore a vest made of human scalps. And they allowed him to do that, trying to get along with the old boy. Well, I didn't know whether I wanted to go up there and buy a postal card or not, but I did, rather than to show too much fear. So up I went. I gave him the nickel with trembling hand and took the card. And I've always said if he'd have said boo, I wouldn't be here today. I think I'd have dropped dead.
Geronimo was
Supposed to be a prisoner, was he not, at that time? And
Oh.
he was still?
Oh, yes, he definitely was, and was there as a prisoner until his death. Every so often they'd call Geronimo in and ask him, if we would let you go, Geronimo, what would you do? He said I'd go out and get as many warriors as I could and scalp as many pale faces as I could find. They said, well, we just wanted to know.
Send him right back then. Your schooling and education started in Tulsa then, when you were 6 or 7.
Yes, that is correct. Riverview School was just a brand new building, and that was in 1908. And when Riverview School started, I started. That was my first year in school.
And you have a friend who started the same year you did.
Yes, my good friend Rex Evans, who is still around Tulsa here, was right across the aisle from me. So he and I both started at the same time.
Do you remember anything about the subjects or how you were taught?
Did you have the old blueback speller, or do you remember anything about your teacher's methods?
Oh, I always liked all my teachers. Oh, I had, one or two exceptions, but my favorite. But I tell you, my real favorite was in the 6th grade. I've always said I learned more in the 6th grade, I believe, than any other grade. And she was a real teacher, and her name was Fuller, Mrs. Fuller. I know one little trait, and I think it was wonderful. In fact, I know it was. At noon, after we came back and came in class, of course, we'd been playing, and we're hot and excited. And she'd tell us to sit down and relax, and she would read us a chapter out of the Rover Boys. And she'd either do that or give us a lecture or read us an article on, for instance, a mad dog, and what to find in a mad dog, and how to tell a mad dog, and what to do. And also she told us about gasoline exploding in a closed place. And further, she told us about a candy factory exploded. And they wondered and they investigated, and it was the powdered sugar that mixed with the air. And sugar, of course, is very inflammable. And it mixed to a proper, and it for combustion, and it blew up this candy factory. I think back of so many, many things that Miss Fuller told us, that 15 minutes from the time we came in at noon, and I've remembered it all my life.
Well, that was a wonderful 15 minutes, I'm sure. It sounds like she had a real safety campaign going, although they perhaps hadn't organized such in education at that time. But it sounds like she was before her time on that.
Absolutely.
After you went into business with your father and the plumbing business, and I believe you said you had been on the same location. Your business has been on the same location for how many years?
Well, that would be the Plumber Supply Company at First and Elwood, and we opened there in 1919. And then we liquidated the corporation and tore down the building, leveled the lot, and really quit. And that was in 1969.
But it had been 50 years.
Yes, it's been there.
Tell us something about the changes in the plumbing work itself, your materials, and your methods of using them.
Well, I would say this, that we have gone from more to plastic pipe, from, we moved from galvanized steel pipe to copper pipe, and now they're moving into plastic pipe. That has been the biggest change. in the plumbing materials. I would say that the biggest change in the plumbing is the fact that we do have more for each home. We used to have one bathroom, and now why we have one bathroom for every bedroom, virtually that much. Again, in your commercial work in hotels, we used to have room with a few with bath and many without, with the toilet room down at the end of the hall. But that day has gone, and you don't find that situation anymore. So that's the big change in the industry as I see it.
You mentioned some of the difficulties and also some of the advantages of the plastic pipe. The way that it is welded. Could you explain that to us?
Well, yes, on plastic pipe, that is, the plastic pipe is lighter to handle. Consequently, it goes in quicker and easier. And due to the fact that labor costs are very important in construction, why, that allows them to give you more house for your dollar. Again, the plastic pipe is put together with a sort of a paste, and the pipe is pushed into a fitting, and it takes what they call a chemical weld, making it about one and the same material. It cannot be removed if you've made a mistake where you cut it out and start over. So plastic pipe is moving in, and that, of course, will be the pipe of tomorrow all the way through the job, whether it be the waste lines, the cold water lines, and the hot water lines.
Well, I had always thought that your problems on tall buildings in your plumbing would be pressure problems. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. On multiple story building and real high, of course, your water, you have to get the water have pressure enough to get it up there. And then, of course, you have that same problem of the static pressure of the water on the lower floors. So if it's a multiple story building or up several floors, many times they pump water up to these different levels and then pump it on up above, making a break, or it would be like several small buildings, so to speak. And that way it relieves the heavy pressure at the base on that section of the building.
I thought that was interesting. I believe I forgot to ask you about your marriage and to whom?
Yes, I was married in 1945 to Bernice Ash, and she passed away a few years ago.
And she lived in Tulsa, or I believe you said Pond Creek.
Yes, she originally was from Pond Creek, Oklahoma, and down there in Indian Territory days. And then moved up to Tulsa in later years.
Mm-hmm. She was an old-timer too then. Her people were Indian Territory people.
That is correct, and she was very well known around Tulsa in radio and television circles as a continuity writer.
Oh.
I believe that
You mentioned something about Kendall College and the fact that that was moved here from Muskogee.
Yes, that is correct. It was moved here. I do not recall at the moment the year, but Kendall College was moved here as a Presbyterian college. And later, Kendall College became University of Tulsa.
But it became a city college, is that correct?
Yes, that...
Taken out of the church.
That is correct. That is correct, and it is as it now is today.
Tulsa University made quite a reputation for itself last year with its football. We followed your young pastor that had such a reputation. We TV and other places. Has TU, do you feel that its curriculum, has it broadened quite a bit since the days of Kendall?
Oh, yes, I should say it has. And there's hardly a comparison between the two. Now, of course, they're a fully accredited university as well, I guess, as any in the country. And they are very well known for their School of Petroleum Engineering. And that's where we draw most of our foreign students are studying petroleum engineering. So TU is known all over the world due to those people that have been here and have been associated with the oil industry back in their home country.
That's right. I know that in some of the foreign countries, it's referred to, even in Greece, I heard, of Tulsa as the oil capital of the world. Perhaps some of the Greek boys had been over here.
I don't know who had studied here, but probably some of them had. But at any rate, they were familiar with your slogan, the oil capital of the world. I heard it in Athens, Greece.
Yes, that is right, and I am not familiar with but we've had people I don't know from how many different countries at TU.
I'm going to give you just a little bit of rest now for a minute. We would like so much to hear some of your experiences as amateur radio operator. I understand you've been in that field for some time.
Yes, that is true. I have been, and I'm an amateur radio operator. My call is K5LMF. And it is most interesting due to the fact we talk, our range is any place in the world. Under proper conditions and so on, talk to any place in the world. So that's quite an area to cover. I personally have worked and have confirmed about 130 different foreign countries. The greatest pleasure I get out of ham radio, as it is termed, is running phone patches. Now, for instance, we'll have a ship coming back from Vietnam, and they're out in the middle of the Pacific. I contact the operator, the radio operator aboard ship, and then he has a boy there that wants to talk to his folks and let them know he's on his way home. He, we'll say, lives in Chicago. And so I'll say, well, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That, of course, the long-distance call will be from Tulsa to Chicago, so that they will have to pay for. And incidentally, we always run these collect calls. So, yes, and when the operator says this is a collect call from little Johnny, why, she said, oh, yes, I'll accept it. Doesn't make any difference where it's from. So then I patch him in to her, and it's a one-way proposition, meaning off and on, and they say over, and then I throw it from transmit to receive and vice versa. So I hear some very interesting conversations, and they'll be lined up on the ship. And I have been there over 2 hours running phone patches on a ship on the way back. And it certainly was most gratifying to think I was making so many people so happy.
Well, when you once get tuned in on a thing like that, it's better, isn't it, to go right ahead then and stay your entire time as long as it's permitted?
Well, so far as long as it's permitted, you can go on 24 hours and round the clock if you cared to. There's no time limit.
I told you they might.
Well, yes. Now, aboard ship there, why they'll come along, but most generally, I'm sitting there throwing that switch, and after a couple hours, I'm about ready to quit. So I have to postpone that for another day. But we don't hit those long runs too often, and we do pick up people here and there. We do transmit a lot of information back and forth in case of disaster, letting people know that the folks at the other spot are okay. And so we do a lot of that sort of thing, which I know everyone's familiar with.
When I was teaching at Claremore, my little daughter was in a tornado in Norman, and a ham operator from Tulsa called me. The phone lines were just either down or in such congested condition I couldn't hear from Norman at all, and I was tremendously uneasy. And about 9 o'clock that night, some ham operator from Tulsa called me and said, have your daughter here. I'm talking with her now. Would you like to hear from her? And I know something about how happy it makes you feel because I was teaching at the time, and I knew the next day I couldn't talk with her. I'd be in the classroom all day. I just wonder if that was some of your good deeds then.
No, that didn't happen to be me. That didn't happen to be me at that time. But it comes to my mind now that, as I say, I talked to quite a few people all over, of course, the United States and over the world. But many, many times they'll ask me, well, how long have you lived down in this bow and arrow country in Oklahoma? And I tell them, well, the Arkansas River goes by Tulsa here. And so my folks, I came here with my folks just in time to help the Indians finish digging that Arkansas River.
We would like now to change this a little bit to your work that you have done in the community here in Tulsa. You have been a community leader for years, president of the Rotary Club and other groups that have been the leaders in the big things that Tulsa has done. Your port city of Tulsa and so on.
Yes, I have been more or less active for a number of years in the various civic organizations, particularly in Rotary. And I will say one thing, that I was president of Rotary in 1954 and 55 the year. And there's one thing that is outstanding that I am proud of, and that is that we had a pancake festival, and we sold tickets, and this pancake festival lasted one day, and we netted over $14,000 in that one day, all given to the Tulsa Boys Home for construction work, or acquisition of land is what it was for. But I'm very proud of that, and I'm glad you asked me that question.
What that you have done in the Rotary Club as leaders in the various campaigns that Tulsa has had.
They tell me that you are one of the foremost in that.
Well, I don't know about that foremost, but I have participated in, of course, Community Chest and so on and so forth in all those various campaigns, one way or another. So far as Rotary Club is concerned, Rotary Club is always involved in that sort of work. And we have always been ready, willing to go on all, and we do every year. Particularly the Salvation Army kettles at Christmas time. And that is allocated to a different Rotary Club every day. I beg your pardon, allocated to a different civic club every day. And Rotary has won that since it's every year except one, since it was started.
something now about your recollections of the very beginning of making Tulsa a port city. My geography said this was a desert country here, and now I'm learning it's a port city.
Well, of course, that has been going on, and they have talked about making the Arkansas River navigable. And I think it was Bill Skelly said one time, the thing they should do is pave it. So, and the way it looked in the middle of the summer, why, that was about right. But nevertheless, why, there was quite a bit of work done, and they were still singing the song about having navigation and boat transportation for Tulsa. And of course, Senator Kerr carried the ball, and he is the man, along with Senator McClellan from Arkansas. And they, of course, made the thing possible and had the money appropriated. So it's a dream that came true, and I'm amazed at it every day I think about it. So it is going to be, I think, without question, a great, great boom to Tulsa. The biggest boom to Tulsa, of course, was Spavinaw water. And without Spavinaw water, why, we would never be up to the point. Then the next big boom to Tulsa is water navigation.
It seems to me that as you think of the great barges that they're floating now by those locks, isn't that quite an engineering feat?
Well, the principle there on the locks, yes, it is, but it isn't exactly new. You know, we've had locks and lakes and water navigation for many, many years. In fact, they had locks and all that over in Europe many, many years before, let's say, Columbus got over here. So it is a nice engineering job, and of course, we do it a little differently than we did then. We use a little different material, and but it is really quite something and an interesting thing to go through a lock and see how they actually raise that boat or lower it.
What depth does the water actually come to on those lakes that are formed by the lock?
Well, they have gone, I don't know, I can't say the storm, but all 25, 30, 40, 60 feet. Would be the distance they lift them up in many cases.
Then the steamboat could be floated there.
Oh yes, they run them in the lock and close the gate and fill it with water, and it floats right up to the level of the lake upstream.
How much is it lifted from its beginning as it comes upstream? Do you remember how many feet it is lifted by the various locks?
Let's see, I think it's 1 foot per 1 foot per mile, I believe, that they have to lift it. I think it's approximately that.
I remember I was surprised when I was in Claremore, and they told me about how much that was lifted from the time the river until it came into port, and I was amazed.
Yeah, I don't recall that right off, but I would say, well, I hesitate to say, I really don't recall. It's quite a lift, all right.
It's quite an engineering feat. And how much business is it doing? Is it actually doing what we had hoped it would do?
I rather think it is doing more than they anticipated for the first year. And they have plenty of other materials coming to where it will be, I think, go clear past the estimates of the Corps of Engineers.
materials are they transporting mostly now? What companies are using it? Come here.
On incoming has been quite a bit of steel and steel pipe and structural steel. That's on incoming, and newsprint. That was some of the first material that came in. Now outgoing is the thing we're going to have to build up, and outgoing will be a great deal of wheat in season. And then, of course, Oklahoma and around this area, there's plenty of coal, not very deep, you know, where we do strip mining. The coal mining is coming back, and there will be a great deal of, they'll have proper transportation and so on. I am told that the Corps of Engineers estimate is that they can load coal on at Port of Catoosa, down the Mississippi to New Orleans, load it on other ships, and ship it to Germany cheaper than they can deliver coal from England to Germany. Now, the big factor in that is that the mines in England are very deep, and it costs quite a bit more to put the coal on top of the ground, and that's where we are able to compete. And our coal industry is going to pick up in this area.
Is that the round picture, and in there, is that our principal coal mining territory?
No, the round picture, and in there is lead and zinc, was lead and zinc. Those were the mines up there. The coal is any place around. Right here, right under Tulsa, there's plenty of coal. Just out on the outskirts, over here at Dawson, and out by Broken Arrow, and over by Catoosa, in fact, the town of Catoosa. So there's coal right there at the port area if, you know, if they care to strip mine it.
The very early leaders of Tulsa, Mr. Holmes, besides yourself, what contributions did they make to getting this? First of all, you had to sell the idea, not only to the people of Oklahoma, but to Congress. Can you tell us something about that era when the idea was new, just born, and people were very doubtful about it?
Oh, well, people were very doubtful, and about all you heard was navigation of the Arkansas River. And when you would go down and look at it, all we'd see was sand, and that bothered us considerably. So we couldn't quite visualize what to do. Again, the engineers came along and said they would come up to Muskogee, and incidentally, I saw boats on the Arkansas at Muskogee when I was just a boy. And so that end of it.
Oklahoma, but to Congress. Can you tell us something about that era when the idea was new, just born, and people were very doubtful about it?
Oh, well, people were very doubtful, and about all you heard was navigation of the Arkansas River. And when you would go down and look at it, all we'd see was sand, and that bothered us considerably. So we couldn't quite visualize what to do. Again, the engineers came along and said they would come up to Muskogee, and incidentally, I saw boats on the Arkansas at Muskogee when I was just a boy. And so that end of it, we were all concerned, yes, but the engineers came along and they looked it over and surveyed and said, we'll go up the Verdigris River, and the Verdigris River is quite a meandering stream, and they would cut across those places with channels and come on up. So that way, the dams and locks, you'd only have a very short dam because the Verdigris River was comparatively narrow. If they had come up the Arkansas, why, they would put dams across that. That would be very, very expensive. The Arkansas is a very wide river. Again, we would come up to, we'll say, about the 11th Street Bridge and have a port area down there, which would not be very pretty. So they said we were using very good judgment by going into Catoosa off away from town, and then we can beautify the waterfront on the Arkansas. So that's about that story.
It carries more water than people think it does. I've seen that substage, and it was tremendous. And I remember that as a project then in trying to hold that wild thing, I remember then it was proposed that there be dams and locks put in there.
That is correct, and the verdigris bottom land from an agricultural standpoint is the finest corn land in the country. But it used to flood every, I'd say 1 out of 3 anyhow, or sometimes more, and ruin the corn crop. But if they always said if they got 1 out of 3, it was worth their effort. So they were looking forward to a dam above to control the floodwaters. Oh yes, that land is covered with silt that is settled on there, and that's what makes it so very fertile and wonderful corn country.
The outgoing, the export you spoke of, do you think that we're going to be able to, within a few years, prove the actual feasibility of exporting things on the Arkansas River?
Oh, definitely. We will. The wheat, for instance, that item will be going down to the, pardon me, down to the river and on down to New Orleans and loaded up and sent on to Europe. We've been shipping a great portion of our wheat over to Europe anyhow. So this way maybe we'll get it over there a little cheaper with this movement. Oh yeah, there'll be lots of wheat going down in season.
Well, that's seasonal. I just wondered, are we ever going to be able to have passenger service and things like that, do you think?
Saturday of this week, I'm going to be a passenger on the verdigris, and I'll go down the verdigris and back for a little trip. I understand that they are also having...
You can buy passes?
Well, these are special trips, and they're having some now that you ride the bus down to Muskogee and get on the boat and come up to Port of Catoosa on a paddle wheeler. And yes, so that is going on right now.
Well, that's going to be quite good. That's a wonderful thing. I didn't know this. I had heard of these rafts that were taking the boat trip, but I didn't know that we had ways that we could actually use the paddle wheeler and come back up.
Yeah, we're having that now, and I think you're going to see more and more of that. People here are very anxious, to make a trip, and there'll be excursions, I'm sure, from Tulsa clear to New Orleans. So the thing to do would be to ride down to New Orleans and fly back, or vice versa.
It'd be interesting if you had a little bit more publicity on that, so that we could find it out over the state on that. Bruce would be most interested in that. Not only the novelty of it, but also the interest in those things. Mr. Holmes, what's in the Rotary Club? How many years did you head that?
Well, I was an officer in there for several years, but, as president for just the 1 year. That's right.
There was one of your friends who told me that your term of office saw more progress than the average ones have been making. was your project?
Well, as I previously mentioned, was concerning the Pancake Festival, where we netted $14,000. And, I don't know. That stands out in my mind so strong that I hesitate to even think about some of the other projects.
That money was the beginning of a foundation for a charity purpose.
Oh, that money went to the Tulsa Boys Home for the acquisition of a land for future buildings. And of course, as I say, that was in 54 and 55.
That project, of course, is the one that you are credited with in your administration, in your tell us something about that as it is today.
Well, then it was 2 or 3 or 4 years after that they acquired land, as this money was set aside to acquire land for future expansion. And this land was purchased in a few years after that, and now they have on it 2 fine new buildings out there, so they're able to take care of more boys.
What types of boys do you take? Is it some school of correction, or is it arsonists, or what?
No, it is not a school of correction, nor do we take, as a rule, bad boys. They are boys from broken homes, and that's about the picture. And I might add that at the Tulsa Boys Home, it's my understanding that they have had only one boy over all the years that really went bad.
That's remarkable. It is a boy then that really is needs parental guidance and help of that nature, perhaps a little emotional disturbance and so on. That can be helped over those years and then make good.
That is right, and I might say that those that belong to the Tulsa Boys Home, your dues are $100. That means that you buy a ticket to the annual $100 dinner, and that, of course, is your dues, and you're a member of Tulsa Boys Home. And we have that each year, and that's for upkeep. Yes, that is, and then community fund, and then individual donations. And then for those that have deceased, why we send out a memorial to the Tulsa Boys Home. And that is a source of income that's very, very good.
Are there any other stories that you would like to tell us now of the early days Tulsa? Something that could perhaps designate a certain era? Of course, we haven't touched on oil at all.
Well, I'm not too well, of course, being around here. Of course, you can't help but let a little of that oil rub off on you. But no, I hadn't planned or have I been involved in the oil industry as such. So I have spent most of my time in a direct connection with the construction industry, let's put it that way. And, as you mentioned there, I'm also past president of the local chapter of the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers, and also am a life member of the National. So I, too, still, although retired, still like to go back and attend those meetings and try to keep up with progress in the industry.
Could you draw us a word picture of the Tulsa that you knew when you came in 1906, the downtown portion of it, and mention some then of the buildings that Tulsa is really proud of today?
I recall that in arriving here in 1906, we arrived at the old Frisco Depot, virtually on the site of the present depot, and, well, I mean in that general area. But the business section of Tulsa at that time was First and Main. And there was the Wells Fargo Express Company there on Main, and then the National Supply Company and the Oil Well Supply Company. These were supply companies supplying materials for the oil field. And, of course, everything was oil, oil, oil. That's all you heard. That was the First and Main was the big corner. And a few years after that, why, of course, it moved up to Second and Main and so on. But above Second and Main were residences, and I remember there was quite a few mulberry trees lined along there, and how they'd squash all over the sidewalk. I recall that because I'd be going along there barefooted. So that's how I remember it. But that is about my early conception of Tulsa, Oklahoma, with plenty of sand around and plenty of sandburrs. Bare Feet told me about that too. So, and I might say that we lived at the corner of 8th and Boulder, on the southwest corner where the Holy Family Roman Catholic Church is today. And on the corner there, we lived in a little square house, and 4 rooms, and a barn, and we kept a cow, and we had horses for the plumbing wagon, and we had a garden in the backyard, and a well. There was 3 houses in a row, and there was one dug well there, and I might say that was very fine water. And that was our water. And we had the bucket and the dipper in the kitchen for our drinking water, and that was it.
Tell us something about the buildings that now stand on those sites.
Well, let's see. Let's take where Public Service Company is today at 6th and Main. There was a residence there, the Glen residence. And the Glen, the people there that was Glen Poole was named after Glen, who was an oil man that lived there. Then down at, well, as I mentioned, at that time they were just building the First National Bank building, the big skyscraper, 5 stories high at 2nd and Main on the northwest corner. And then, let's see, I'm trying to think of, well, the Brown Duncan's building that was dynamited, you know, down for just lately to make way for the First National Bank's new tower building. It was built on a lot that was used for war stamps and all that sort of thing in World War I. It was a vacant lot. But then Brown Duncan came on and built their building there, and then it was dynamited down, make way for the new First National Bank Tower that is now under construction.
What about the hotel?
Well, at the time we got here, there was the Robinson Hotel, which was on the edge of town, so to speak. It was at 3rd and Main, and on the southwest corner, that was the Robinson Hotel, and then the Brady Hotel over on the north side. So that was about the extent of the hotels. I might add that they used to have a hack go down to the railroad station and bring the passengers back to the Robinson Hotel. And I've seen the hack mire down in the mud in front of the hotel and had to get some extra help to pull it out. So our roads were not, our streets, I should say, were not so very good in those days.
The Mayo Hotel, about what time was it? Do you remember?
It was right around 1920. It opened I think, in 1920 or 21, something like that. It's right in that area. And I might add that on that corner was the Bynum residence. He was an old pioneer here, and that Bynum residence was a fine, fine residence with the driveway in across the corner, you know, for the carriage to come in. And the Bynum residence was torn down, and the Mayo Hotel was built at that location.
When the motel situation came in, did that affect the hotel during that?
Yeah, it certainly did, and all the hotels were having a hard time getting along, and I think still are, to the best of my knowledge.
The motels, though, are coming further and further downtown. They used to be on the outskirts of the city, you know, but now we have the downtowner and the Holiday Inns and things that now are moving right in where the principal part of the city and the life of the city is. Do you think that's going to help the hotel situation?
Oh, I don't know that it will, but you don't have any trouble getting rid of your car, don't you see? And that seems to be the thing that that a great number of people, the traveling men, do like. Again, the tourist sometimes does not care to stop in Tulsa. He just wants to stop on the edge of town and be off and gone the next morning. So consequently, he does not want to come into a hotel.
We're more and more getting these either these highways, expressways straight through a city, or we're going around it, as in the St. Louis area and so on. I wanted to ask if you could think of any particular stories that would add to the color of these early experiences that you've had.
Oh, I don't believe I can think of one at the moment. I was trying to think of some, but no, I don't believe I do at the moment. Probably think of a lot of them a little later. Back in the early days of Tulsa, when we had very few automobiles, we had, I think, about 10 or 12 in town. Well, one very prominent oil man bought a new car, and he parked it on Main Street between 1st and 2nd. When he came back to his car, he was so proud of that new car. There was as he got in the car, why, a fellow got in with him, and another one got in the back seat, and they each had guns and said, "Just start driving." And they had him drive way out east, about to where the traffic circle is now, out near Mingo. At that point, they had him get out of the car, and it was a hot, dusty day, and he got out of the car, and they went on with his brand new automobile he was so proud of. Well, he started walking back to Tulsa, and finally picked up a ride and came in. And when he got in town, he went down to the World and bought a full-page ad. And on it, it stated there about his car being stolen, and he would give a reward of $50 for these fellows alive and 500 dead. So I believe he's a little bit mad.
Well, we're going to have to know, did they get him? They didn't find them. The very early automobiles in Tulsa, was that when your paving then began, after the cars came in and then they had to pave?
That is right, and then our first paving was at 1st and Main, going from Maine to Boston and from Maine to Boulder, and it was brick paving, all hand laid. And that was our first pavement in Tulsa.
If you think of any other stories that will give us the color of that era, we would love to have it.
During the construction here, in the early days of the construction of the Tulsa County Library, I talked to my good friend Joe Koberling. He was the architect on this library building. And I told him, I said, Joe, you watch the footings on the north end of your building. When you do some drilling over there for those footings, I said, pay close attention to it and be sure that you're on firm ground. The reason for that is that you are either on or very close to the old creek that ran by there. And so Joe said, well, he'd certainly look into that. Well, in a few days in their drilling, they would run into gas pockets, which they would, of course, relieve the pocket of the gas, leaving a void down there. So they did have quite a little bit of doing to find a good firm foundation for the north end of the building. The same thing happened over at the post office north across the street from the library. And they too ran into the old creek bed and had some difficulty and had to go down a little deeper than they anticipated. So I'm sure that both buildings are on good farm soil today. And I beat my good friend Joe Koberling, and he and I generally talk about that invisible creek. But I told him that in the early days I would be riding my pony around, and I was kind of the creek inspector. As a boy, I had to find out about these creeks and so on and so forth. So, and I would trail them down to the river, and so I knew where they went and so on and so forth. So I'm sure that both buildings are in good order and on good firm foundations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holmes. It's been such a pleasure to have this interview with you.